fellow romance readers, I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and this is Post-Book Depression. You know that feeling you get when you finish a good book that you didn't want to end?
Have you finished a book and just weren't ready to move on from the story and its beloved characters? You find yourself needing just a little more? This multi-trope romance podcast gives you the opportunity to dig deeper with us into books we love as we discuss all the reasons we can't move on.
Feeling chatty? You can continue the conversation with us on Instagram at Post-Book Depression Podcast or on Facebook in our Post-Book Depression discussion group.
We would be so grateful if you would subscribe to our podcast and take a moment to leave a review.
Are you ready? Let's discuss.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be discussing The Magic of Light by Jordan Abitz.
The first few minutes we're going to do a brief review of the story without any spoilers. Then we are going to shift into a deeper book discussion that's going to include lots of spoilers, but don't worry. As always, we're going to let you know before we do shift over into that deeper book discussion.
That's right. So before we jump in, Amy, tell us a little bit about the story.
A young woman who spent her childhood bouncing from one foster home to the next now spends her adult life advocating for those in the same broken system. When a child in her care runs away on a country road, she has to rely on the help from a grumpy cowboy who owns the land. This introduction starts a journey of healing as she is forced to face the loss and trauma from her past in order to find healing in the present. Sarah, what did you think about The Magic of Light?
Well, while the topic that they kind of deal with in the story is hard to handle, I felt like the author did a really beautiful job kind of showing us the journey that you can go on and that the characters go on. So I loved it. It was moving. It was hard. It was hard to read because when you think about it in real life, but it was a good story.
Moving is the perfect word for that. It is dual timeline. It is dual POV, which I am a fan of both. We both are both fans of that. The male main character in this story is so patient and kind with the female main character, which, I mean, just past their initial meet cute, but because he is a grumpy cowboy that I mentioned. Yeah. He's very endearing, and I think that was needed for this storyline specifically.
I agree.
Let's get into our ratings. Angst.
This was just a 1.
1 for me as well. Yeah. Not very heavy. Humor.
0.
I did 0.25. I had just like 1 or 2 little chuckling moments.
I had to really think, and I couldn't think. It felt more...
subdued.
Yes, that's the good word. Yes.
Spiciness. 0. I did 0.5. It's a slow burn. There is a little bit of intimacy towards the end, but not...
But it's not it's not, like, you don't get it. It's not on page.
Correct. This is mostly for tension and chemistry. It is off page, and it is a slow burn.
Yeah.
Tears.
I put 3 just because of the topic alone, because of everything the female main character goes through, not because I sobbed. I did not sob during the story, but the topic at hand is very hard.
It is a heavy topic. I did 1. I didn't cry. This is definitely a heavy topic. I probably could have gone higher for the topic alone. I'm going to stick with 1, but as you mentioned, it is a heavy topic.
If you're basing it off of whether or not it's going to like make you sob, 1 would be great. For me, it was just more of the
tone of the story.
The tone of the story, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Overall,
this was a 4.25.
I gave it a 4.5. I really enjoyed having a front row seat to the healing journey of this female main character. I felt the author's portrayal of such a heavy topic was beautifully done.
I agree.
And the story stayed with me after I finished it.
Yeah.
Long time. That concludes the spoiler-free quick review of the story. Now we're going to shift over into a deeper book discussion, which is going to include lots of spoilers. If you haven't read this story, go check it out and come back and join us on this deeper discussion, and then we would love to connect with you on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Post-Book Depression Podcast, on Facebook in our Post-Book Depression discussion group, and you can also email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. Anytime there's an author's note in a story, you better believe I'm going to be reading it. Did you read the author's note at the start of the story?
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that she said that really sets the tone for this story is, you can't love trauma away. And I felt like that really sets the premise for what we're getting ready to dive into. Yeah. Let's begin our discussion talking about the opening scene in the past where Sawyer is running away from foster care at 14 years old.
This was so nerve-wracking for me because I just thought somebody was going to come in and catch her as she's trying to break in and get whatever possession it is. We don't know what it is at that point.
Yeah.
But I thought she was going to get caught. And just her inner dialogue of thinking about these young kids that are also in the foster home, but she can't stay any longer. She has to protect herself. She hopes that they don't become as jaded as she is, you know, just with the experiences that she's had in foster care, and unfortunately what a lot of people experience. But it was intense. I was nervous. Were you nervous?
I was definitely nervous. I wasn't really sure what she was going to run into before she escapes, and I was thankful that it didn't turn into a situation.
I agree.
We fast forward to the present timeline, and we have Sawyer. She's now a social worker working in the foster care system, helping kids that are still in this broken system, and she's become a social worker so that she can try and help kids that are going through maybe some of the same things and experiences that she had. And she's taking a young 9-year-old boy, Connor, from a court hearing to a respite family. On the way there, he's very frustrated with how the outcome of the court hearing went. He's wanting to go home to be with his dad, who we learn is not suitable to take care of him at this time. As they're traveling through these rural country roads, Connor just jumps out of the car and takes off. Ooh, what were you feeling in this moment? Were you as panicked as I was?
I was panicking, yeah, because he's 8 or 9, I believe, and I'm just thinking, oh, okay, that's very stressful. And then the way she handled it, though, she was so calm. And, I mean, I'm sure she wasn't, like, feeling calm, but she responded calmly. You know, she called the people she needed to call. It wasn't her first runaway, which I thought, is that a thing? Does that happen? And I'm like, I guess it does. But man, I don't know. I like in my head, I'm like, she's going to lose her job, you know, but I guess it's kind of a thing. I mean, if you're dealing with kids that are being bounced around from home to home, I could definitely imagine you're going to have some of them run on you.
And from my perspective, she followed the proper channels and notifying all the appropriate people. So.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I thought was so brilliant is that she had a ribbon in her glove box and tied it to the fence so that she could mark where he had ran, and I just thought, that's genius. Yeah, it was nerve-wracking.
The 911 dispatcher that she did finally connect with told her that she's at her brother's house and to stay there, and he would be there to help her. So we are expecting the dispatcher's brother in a warm, welcoming, environment when she's waiting for help to go search for Connor. That is not what she got. We got a brisk, burly introduction. They don't really have a warm and fuzzy meet cute.
No, they don't. He's very cranky.
Yes. Let's talk about meeting Soren and his reaction to Sawyer when she comes up.
Well, he comes up. He's very gruff for sure and is not happy that she's on his porch.
He's making a lot of assumptions about her.
Yes,
based on his history.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could see why he would immediately go there, but I did think it was interesting because she's trying to explain that the dispatcher said she was at her brother's house, and if he had just listened, he could have cleared it up very quickly that, oh no. But he's assumed immediately I don't have a sister. He didn't really take the time to kind of hear her out. It isn't until his helper, ranch hand guy, comes up that it all kind of gets resolved. But man, at that point, he's already, I don't know, put his foot in his mouth.
He definitely has put his foot in his mouth. But once he realizes what is happening, he jumps on board for this search for Connor. And really, this community rallies around Sawyer in this search for Connor. They spend several hours searching for him. I'm really concerned for Connor in this moment. They're talking about how there's going to be a cold front coming in that night. He's not dressed appropriately for that. He's not familiar with the area. Doesn't have food. All the things that you would need to survive. So let's just briefly talk about this search for Connor.
This was very nerve-wracking because it's taking hours. I did love during the search that he has this complete change of heart, that he offers her the hoodie, gives her a protein bar, gives her water. It's very, taking care of her. And you can kind of see that he has this squishy inside, you know, that ooey gooey cinnamon roll kind of, and wants to help her find this young boy, but also like take care of her. He realizes he was very harsh with her, and
He's feeling bad about that.
Yeah, and so it's very interesting to see the turn in his personality and his treatment of her during this. And I was here for that.
I was too, which is interesting because it's the complete opposite from her perspective. She's riding alongside in this ATV with him, or UTV. She's asking questions, and every time she asks a personal question of him, he diverts the question to something else and doesn't really answer. So he's appearing very mysterious, very closed in on himself, but yet he's very nurturing to her, which is kind of a juxtaposition between the two things, and I found that very interesting.
I did too.
Let's talk about Sawyer. Let's just unpack her childhood and all of the meat that comes along with the heaviness of her past. We've got a lot to unpack, so let's take some time here to just really dive into Sawyer.
So we find out, it's much later in the story that we find out that she's actually been in foster care from the time she was 2. Her parents died in a boating accident, I believe it was. They died in an accident. I'm pretty sure they said boating. So she has been bounced around from house to house. She's lived through the worst of foster care.
Yeah.
The absolute worst. She has suffered all kinds of abuse. Thankfully, the author kind of spares us, doesn't go into too much detail of...
Yeah, all of that is off page.
What it is, right. But it's definitely alluded to the severity, and it has completely changed her entire life. She definitely suffers from trauma. This was very interesting to me that she suffers not just from PTSD, but she suffers from CPTSD. Did you know what that was before this? I didn't either. I had never heard of complex PTSD, and it's where a person has experienced recurring trauma over and over and over and over again. So that was very interesting. I did a little deep dive trying to understand that more. You know, she has kind of a comfort. So the item that we realized that she was trying to get back from that one foster home was a set of dog tags. We'll dive more into that in a minute, but that kind of keeps her grounded a little bit in stressful situations. She has to have a weighted blanket. She has a stocked pantry. She never wants to feel hunger again.
A lot of anxiety that she's dealing with.
Very clean home. Very I just picture everything is orderly.
She has to be in control of everything because she had such a lack of control in her life growing up. It's imperative that she have control over the things in her life. One
of the things that I found the most interesting about her, and it really kind of made me start to think about children who do grow up in foster care and just the constant bouncing around and never really having anybody take you under their wing and teach you things, is the amount of YouTube help videos she has to watch, because she doesn't even pick up on a lot of social things. And I found that very interesting because I never would have really thought about somebody struggling with that didn't have something personal to, just like within their personality, that they don't understand social norms or things like that. So that was a very interesting...
That was eye-opening to me as well. I don't think that is a perspective that I probably would have considered had it not been for this story, and it was very eye-opening to me. Also, just thinking through the lens of her and the trauma that she's faced, and just the foster care, bouncing around from house to house and not having that stability to have someone to teach her simple things like social cues.
It was really interesting to me to find out that she had been in foster care from the time she was 2 until she was 18 and aged out, that nobody ever tried to adopt her. And
she always felt nobody ever chose her, which is the foundation for why she has this standoffish feeling towards Soren.
Yeah, I think this was interesting to read this character because, I mean, I've known people in foster care. I'm sure you've known people who have been in foster care. I've known several. And so I kind of knew, some of the things that emotionally what they feel, like conversations I've had and stuff, but to really kind of see it through her perspective and what it's like, and how she just not feeling loved and not feeling like you have anybody in your corner, and nobody to show up for you and struggling to make connection with people. That was very interesting to me, that she has just this one solid friend.
Let's talk about Talia.
Okay.
And the friendship that they have. She has safety, and she has a place to be vulnerable in her friendship with Talia. And this is the only person that she has in her life that she can be open with and be honest. Let's talk briefly about her friendship and what Talia provides in comfort and friendship to Sawyer.
She is a breath of fresh air. She's very loud and vibrant. Literally, she wears a lot of neon. I love that she allows Sawyer to feel all of those emotions. I love that she hugs her, and Sawyer allows that, because that's physical touch is kind of a thing that's...
It's a trigger for her.
It's a trigger for her. I do feel like it helps that she is a therapist, so she can kind of understand where Sawyer needs, I don't know, just extra patience,
kindness.
Just that she recognizes all those areas, and she gives her that space that she needs, but that she continues to show up for her and continue. One of the things I love in their friendship is when Sawyer will say something negative about herself or how she's not worthy of something, and she will turn it and say, would you allow me to say that about me? Would you allow somebody to say that about me? Like,
friend, I loved that
I did
so
too.
much. And until she said those words, I had never really considered something like that. And it stayed in my head. It stuck with me. And that's something that I want to hang on to. Any time friends or something like that are talking bad about themselves, I'm going to spin that back.
My husband does that to me sometimes. He'll be like, don't talk about my wife like that. She just, and it's so good, because I feel like, she needs to hear that. And she just, she's one of the best friends that, I think she's a living embodiment to Sawyer, that you are worthy of love. And not everybody leaves and walks away. You just haven't had the opportunity to meet the right people. So I love their friendship.
Me too. You mentioned the dog tags earlier as one of her mechanisms to deal with her anxiety, as a calming piece on her body that she can touch and hold and feel grounded. Let's talk about how those came to be, which brings us to her friendship with Abel, whom she was friends with back when she was 7 or 8 years old. She doesn't remember a whole lot about her time growing up in the different foster families that she has bounced around to, but one of the things that is very vivid in her mind is her friendship with Abel, and how this young boy saw her as a person, saw her as someone who is valuable, and wanted to have a friendship with her. He took up for her when she was bullied on the bus and at school, and it was actually Abel who gave her these dog tags, which happened to be his grandfather's dog tags. Let's talk about their friendship for just a few moments.
It was so sweet to be so young and to recognize that somebody needed love and friendship. I love when he stands up for her, and I love that she was able to confide in him that she didn't like her home life, and he gave her the tags telling her that maybe they'll help you be brave. But she only knew him for 6 months or so. It was like a semester of school. They didn't have a long friendship, but he left.
It was definitely impactful, though.
Yes, he left a strong impact on her life, so profound. And later we find out that the town that Connor runs in when she meets Soren, it's all connected. It all seems familiar, but she can't pinpoint. We come to find out that the reason why it's familiar is that's where she knew Abel from.
Yes, so she is curious to see what Abel is up to these days, and so she does a little digging of him on the internet to try and find out where he's at, how old he is, all of those things. And she is devastated to learn that he passed away when he was 17 years old, and she's upset by the fact she did not know that one of her closest friends has not been alive all of this time. And since she's in the area, she decides to head over to the cemetery to see where he has been buried. This is a really chaotic but interesting scene when Soren sees her sitting there. Let's break down the scene.
So he comes in angry again.
Yes, he does.
Very, very very upset that she is there. He doesn't understand, and he doesn't give her a chance to explain yet again, but it's so intense, and she's so frightened in the moment because it triggers a lot for her. She passes out or faints, essentially.
Yeah.
And man, but what a way. I thought, man, next time somebody comes at me like that, I'm just going to faint. Like, if it gets them to calm down, but not really. But Soren is like just completely taken back, kind of panicked a little bit, because she falls back, but he's standing in front of her, so he has to catch her so she doesn't like bust her head on the headstone. There's a lot happening at this scene.
There was a lot happening. When she finally comes to, he's so confused and asking lots of questions. Why does she have his grandfather's dog tags? And they start to make this connection about how she was friends with Abel, and he's thinking in his mind, there's no way. How did I not know you? Abel was my best friend, and how did he not talk about you, and how did I never meet you if he was so impactful on your life? And so he's sort of battling in his mind, trying to figure out the timeline and how he missed all of these things about Abel, who was his best friend. He does tell her when she asks that he died in a car accident. And we'd already started to get some, little sneak peeks and hints he might be an addict. And so I'm wondering at this point if he is responsible for the car accident. So we don't get that information quite yet, but it is kind of laying the groundwork for what's to come. And they have this open conversation about Abel and how he saved her and in all the ways that matter.
It was very interesting to me because, like you said, we're starting to kind of pick up on that he was an addict and whether or not he was the reason for Abel's death. I did pick up when they went to look for Connor that something has happened, but at that time I didn't know it was going to be his brother. I didn't know if it had been a spouse because he buckles her in and she kind of freaks out because
he's adamant on that.
He touches or reaches over her or whatever and says, always wear your seatbelt. And I thought, somebody's died from a car wreck. Like, that was a giveaway immediately that something important has happened to somebody he loves. It was very interesting that it was brother.
He wants to grow a friendship with her. He's very drawn to her once he settles down. The first couple of times, he's very drawn to her and wants to build a friendship with her. And before they part ways, he asks for her number, and they start. Well, he's texting her. He offers a couple of times for them to get together, and she ignores that. It's later when she has a flat tire that she's got to get rescued. He tempts her with a trip to see some baby cows. And this scene was so delightful to me. First of all, my family, growing up, we had cattle. We had tons of cattle, and my mom named every one. So this scene where she's wanting to name the cows was so comical to me because I felt that, her desire to name the cows. But it's here when they're together again that he asks why she's avoiding him, and she opens up about how she struggles with new people, and he lets her know that he wants to thoroughly get to know her so that he's no longer a new person, and she agrees to do that. So while we've talked about Sawyer's past and a little bit about Soren and Abel's brotherhood and friendship together, let's press pause on Sawyer and Soren, and let's talk about Soren specifically and the struggles that he's had growing up.
So we've mentioned that Soren is Abel's older brother. He's older than him by, I believe it's 7 years, right?
It's a good amount. Enough that he did not run into Sawyer.
I think he's 7 years older, if I'm remembering correctly.
That seems correct.
It's not just Soren that's really close to him. It's Soren's two best friends as well that they were
Jonah
extremely close to Abel. Everybody kind of felt like he was their little brother. So when he dies, when she gets the flat tire, I knew something was happening because he was so upset when he arrived that I thought, it's just a flat tire.
Yeah.
What is happening here? But we find out that he would unbuckle his seatbelt closer to home. And Abel one night has to go help Soren.
Well, not just that. He would make fun of Abel for not doing it.
Yeah, that's true. And so he has to go help him, flat tire. Abel doesn't have a seatbelt. And something runs out in front of his vehicle, a deer. He hits it and he flies through the windshield. And he dies in Soren's arms.
Oh, that was so tragic.
So he struggles with his death. He drinks a lot. He spends time with countless women. And it takes a pregnancy scare showing up on his doorstep the way that Sawyer did.
Yes.
Sitting there to kind of wake him up. And it's his two best friends that help him go through his detox. He gets into rehab. So he is a recovering alcoholic, which is interesting because when he gives her his hoodie, she finds a piece of paper and it has like several thousand is greater than one. Mm-hmm. And she thinks in her mind, everybody knows that. And that's kind of Soren's way of keeping track that these are all the days sober. All of that will be undone if I take a drink. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a very unique way of just keeping track of your sobriety and reminding you of your goals. But Soren has definitely struggled and for a good while, but he's been sober for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So that's something definitely to celebrate for him.
We talked about Talia and how her friendship is important to Sawyer. Let's talk about briefly Jonah and Cain, because they were pivotal in his sobriety mm-hmm. and helping him to keep on track. Let's talk briefly about their friendship and the impact that they've had on him.
I really appreciate friends who are like this for people, and they are definitely his brothers, just not by blood. They show up for him. The way that they kind of helped him navigate through that, they stood by him even when he was making really poor decisions. They stood by him. You can tell that there's a bond between the three of them that is unbreakable. What did you think of their friendship?
I loved their friendship so much. I loved the dynamic that they had amongst the three of them and how they show up for one another, mm-hmm. especially the fact that they were the ones that kind of set up an intervention for him when they realized how much trouble he was getting into with his alcoholism, and then the support. I love every time they meet at the gym to spar to help, alleviate any stress or frustration. I really enjoyed watching their bond.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, and this is later on in the story when it's kind of hitting the climax, is Soren is kind of dealing with upsetting news, and he shows up and they've kind of planned this dinner, but it's really kind of a check-in, and he says, yes. I'm sober, I'm okay. But they're like, okay. But the whole reason really is to like, is he okay? Uh-huh. Are we okay? Let us know. And I loved that about them.
I did too. Soren is really adamant on building this friendship with Sawyer, mm-hmm. and he is so incredibly kind and patient. He's recognizing that she has triggers, and he's very aware of those and is just very mindful of what's happening in her life and finding ways to help calm her and bring the anxiety level in her life down. He really wants to have a relationship with her. They go on a couple of dates, which are a lot of fun, building that chemistry together. And she agrees, as long as they take things slow, that she would date him, mm-hmm. essentially. I mentioned earlier about how the foundation for her putting distance between them was because she feels like nobody ever chooses her. And so she doesn't want him to have a reason not to choose her, which is why she pushes so much in the beginning and even as they go through the story. But as they're dating, I want to talk about Soren's creativity in ways that he is learning how to be there for Sawyer so that he can make her feel safe and calm. We learn eventually that he finds books where he studies mm-hmm. different, CPTSD cases and how to understand them. We learn later that he got these recommendations from Talia, which I know. I really loved that he was so supportive of the friendship that Talia and Sawyer had with one another, and just really encouraging her. Anytime Sawyer would put up a fight with him about doing something, he would reach out to Talia to make sure Talia would step in and where she was safe and help. And I just really loved that he had the foresight to be mindful of those kinds of things for her. Once we learn as a reader about his alcoholism, I start to get very nervous about how long is this going to go on before it's mm-hmm. brought to light? When is this going to come out into the open? I really love the author's writing so much in this moment because once Sawyer discovers the sobriety jar, you mentioned all the numbers earlier in his little pieces of paper. It's in the sobriety jar in his room. She point blank asks him about it. And you're bracing for impact. Mm-hmm. And he just is open and honest with her. He's certain that she's going to walk away from him. But I loved how just forgiving and open she was to having this conversation with him and making him feel safe in return.
I know. And I thought that it was very interesting. I kind of thought that that would be the climax, that she might walk away. Mm-hmm. Just because the nature of her entire life, you know, she grew up in foster care. So she has seen a lot. I'm sure she's seen a lot of the negative side effects of alcoholism and what it can do to people. So I was actually a little bit surprised that she didn't walk away knowing that he is an alcoholic, recovering alcoholic, but still it's something that he has to every day get up and make a choice to not drink.
Yeah.
And I was really happy that she could see how hard he's worked and that she was willing to sit and hear him out through the whole thing. Gave me a lot of peace because it was very
yes.
stressful. I was as nervous as he was for
Same.
When he was going to tell her.
She does eventually press pause. Well, it's not pause according to them. It's stop. No. She does break up with him, which is very sudden in his opinion. He's not expecting it. Things are going well. He's not really clear on what's going on. He knows that maybe this isn't really what she wants, but something probably was very triggering for her to cause her to pull back. And she even kind of steps back from her friendship with Talia and starts making excuses. She gets all in her head about worrying about them not choosing her again, and just it's easier to walk away before they do that. Let's talk briefly about their breakup.
I was really frustrated because she kind of has the fight with Talia first, and because she's not showing up for her, and she's tired. And I did feel frustration with her when she said something about,
the job.
Yeah.
Will the job always come first?
Well, she said, yeah, I wasn't frustrated with Talia. I was frustrated with her response of kind of clapping back at her and saying something about the kids and caring, whatever the line was. But I didn't agree. And Talia says, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And I was really proud that she would say that's not fair, because I could see where maybe you would want to walk on eggshells a little bit, but she didn't. I was really frustrated with Sawyer after she hung up, because she just immediately thinks, well, everybody's going to leave me, so I'm just going to end it first. I'm going to walk away.
Yeah.
And I was just frustrated. But with as much as I was frustrated, I kind of feel like if you're setting in her emotions and her feelings and you've been through what she's been through, I could see where you would make that rash decision. But it was
it definitely
so upsetting.
fit. It fit with what she's gone through and what she's dealing with. I really liked that Soren continued to just send her things that he loved about her every day, just reaching out. They did eventually stop, but we don't come to realize that that's because he got into an accident until much later. One of the things that kind of in the midst of all this, you mentioned, where Talia asked her if the job will always come first. Talia has always been an advocate for Sawyer to find a different job, not because she doesn't realize the impact that social work can have on the system in a positive way, but because she feels like Sawyer's so caught up with her past, it's hard for her to differentiate between her present and her past, and it's really taking a toll on her mental health and her well-being. And so Talia has always been in favor of her finding another way, another job, or another opportunity that she can still stay involved to help that community of kids, but not be in the thick of things like she currently is.
Yeah. I appreciate her honesty on that, and that she's just blunt with her and lets her know that she thinks she enjoys the chaos of it all.
Yes.
Because she can't escape it. I kind of wondered that too, that why would you choose to go into a field that you have suffered so much trauma? But then I also understand her point of view of trying to help children that were like her, that she does care, and she's working with coworkers who don't care.
Yeah. And
I understood that, but I also thought you have to, at some point, you have to put yourself first.
Yeah.
And mentally, that job was not helping her at all overcome, her own personal trauma. So I was glad that she had a friend in her corner encouraging her to look elsewhere, but still stay within the scope of helping those families and those children.
One thing that I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the ways that Soren is learning how to be there for Sawyer and kind of work with her through this transition. One of the instances that really made me smile is when they go to get sandwiches together at a little local shop, and they got her order incorrect, and she doesn't speak up and say anything about that, and she just eats the sandwich the way it comes. And he recognizes that, he picks up on that. And in the truck, he asks, why doesn't she say something to the person at work who is stealing her lunch? And she opens up and says she doesn't like confrontation. And one of the challenges that he gives her is that she's got to disagree with him about something. And I loved it so very much.
I loved it too when she was getting ready to leave her job and she put the food dye in her potato salad, and the guy that kept stealing her lunch, his mouth was all dyed. I was like, that's what you get, you big jerk. Golly. What a meanie.
She does in the end. She goes back to therapy because she had stopped that for a while. She's starting to make these changes to help better herself as a person. She quits her job, which was so impressive. And unbeknownst to her, she goes to work for Soren's community center. The guys, Jonah, Kane, and Soren have, worked together to put this community center together. She doesn't know it's theirs. And when she walks in for the interview and there's Jonah and Kane, they've broken up at this point. So Soren chose not to be there for the he was in recovery. Yeah. He had that accident. And this is where it all kind of comes to a head, where she realizes that he had stopped responding, not because he wasn't choosing her, but because he physically couldn't.
Right.
And they shed some light on that.
I love that. I believe it was Jonah pulls her aside and said, he can't handle you breaking his heart a second time, so please be easy with him. I want his story. He was very fascinating to me. But I love when she shows up and it kind of all falls into place. They have the hard conversation, he's in so much pain. You could just feel like was it 5 broken ribs? Oh my goodness.
It was a lot.
But that's where she sees the books that he's studying, trying to understand what she's experienced and how to be there for her and how to love her. And it all ends up happy. The story just really closes out with a feeling of hope.
Yes.
And that's what I loved about this story, is that she walks us through this journey of somebody who has experienced unimaginable trauma throughout their life and is still every day getting up, just like Soren. Soren has to fight for his sobriety, and she has to fight to overcome the life experiences that she has had and to just grow and be better people. And I love that she finally gets to a point where she recognizes that she is deserving of love, and that there are people who are willing to stay for her. And I thought the author did a beautiful job writing it.
I love that, how she wrapped things up, and the way she wrote the story in such a positive and hopeful way.
Yeah, it was the magic of light. Well, it concludes our discussion of the magic of light. We hope you enjoyed this episode and want to continue the discussion with us. You can hit us up on our Instagram page at Post-Book Depression Podcast, or on our Facebook page at Post-Book Depression Discussion Group. You can also email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, keep reading.